The morning began like any other in Mr. Darius's giant mansion. Sunlight slipping through tall glass windows, servants moving quietly through polished halls, and the soft hum of expensive machines filling the air. But the peace lasted only a moment, because today was not a normal day. Today was the day the millionaire felt his entire world collapsing around him. He stood beside his son's bed, staring at the small, pale boy lying motionless under white hospital sheets brought into the mansion for emergency care. Ethan, once full of life, color, and laughter, now looked empty, weak, and frighteningly still. Mr. Darius pressed a shaking hand to his son's forehead, feeling the heat that had refused to leave for weeks. Doctors stood around the room whispering, shaking their heads, flipping through charts, and looking at Mr. Darius with a kind of pity that stabbed deeper than any knife. "We've tried everything," one doctor said with a tired sigh. "His body is not responding to any treatment. We're afraid he has only one day left." The words echoed in the millionaire's mind like thunder, breaking something inside him he didn't know could break. He stepped back, his heart pounding painfully, his throat tight. His eyes blurry. His only child, the one joy left in his lonely life, the reason he worked, the reason he breathed, was slipping away. He grabbed the doctor's arm desperately. "There must be something money can buy. Someone I can call, a treatment in another country," he begged, his voice cracking, but the doctor only lowered his eyes. "Sir, money cannot save him. This is beyond medicine now." Another doctor placed a hand on his shoulder gently. "We're so sorry." But the words felt empty, cold, useless. Mr. Darius raised his voice in pain. No, this can't be happening," he yelled, and for the first time in years, the servants saw him break. He covered his face with both hands, shaking, unable to stand properly. Ethan's mother had died years ago, leaving him alone to raise their son, and now life was cruelly stealing the only family he had left. Tears streamed down his face, falling onto the floor like drops of grief that the mansion's shiny marble could not hide. He turned toward the window, staring out at the bright, beautiful day that felt like a nightmare to him. Outside, the birds were singing, the sky was clear, the world was still moving, but his world had stopped. The mansion, usually loud with staff voices and morning activity, now felt like a silent tomb. The servants whispered in corners, exchanging worried looks, their hearts heavy with sympathy. They had watched Ethan grow up, watched him run through the halls with his toy cars, laugh while sliding on the marble floor, and cling to his father's leg when he was scared. Seeing him like this broke their hearts too. But none of them felt the pain as deeply as the millionaire, who now knelt beside his son, holding his small hand tightly, whispering, "Please wake up, please don't leave me." Ethan's chest rose and fell slowly, weakly, his breathing shallow, his pulse faint, his face so pale it looked like a ghost. Mr. Darius stroked his son's hair gently, his hands trembling. "I'll give anything, take my money, take my life, just save him," he cried softly. The doctors exchanged helpless glances. They had seen many tragedies in their careers, but something about this wealthy man breaking over his small, fragile son made even them swallow hard. As more time passed, the mansion grew darker emotionally, like a storm cloud had settled over it. A heavy sadness hung in the air. Even the workers who normally avoided speaking about the family now whispered sadly as they passed each other. In one corner of the hallway, a young boy stood silently. Samuel, the servant's son, small, thin, wearing old clothes and holding a basket of folded towels for his mother. He looked toward Ethan's room with worried eyes. He didn't know the whole story, but he knew Ethan was very sick. He had seen the fear on the servants' faces. He had felt the sadness in the air. Samuel's heart was soft, gentle, always noticing pain around him, and today he felt a strange pull toward Ethan's room, a feeling he couldn't explain. Inside the room, Mr. Darius sat beside the bed, refusing to move, refusing to eat, refusing to let go of his son's hand. He replayed memories in his mind. Ethan laughing on his shoulders, Ethan calling him Dad, with that tiny voice, Ethan running through the garden, Ethan hugging him tightly each night. The thought of losing all that made Mr. Darius feel like the world was ending. The doctor approached him again, speaking quietly. "Sir, it's best to prepare yourself. We believe he won't survive." The night, Mr. Darius didn't answer. He only whispered Ethan's name again and again like a prayer he hoped someone would hear. Night approached slowly, bringing longer shadows into the room. The servants moved quietly, placing candles and turning off bright lights to make the room peaceful. Samuel passed by again, this time slower. He saw Mr. Darius crying, and something in the boy's heart twisted. A memory flashed in his own mind. A time when he too had been sick, very sick. A time when doctors had said he might not survive. A time when people had given up on him, but someone hadn't. His grandmother had saved him using a rare herbal remedy from her village, an herb almost no one believed in. Samuel hesitated, his small hands shaking as he held the basket tighter. A strange certainty rose inside him. Maybe he was only a poor boy, maybe no one listened to him, maybe no one believed in him, but he remembered what saved him, and he remembered how it felt to be dying. He looked at Ethan again, lying there so pale and still, and he felt something he couldn't ignore. A whisper inside his heart telling him that he had to try, no matter how impossible it sounded. And in that moment, as Mr. Darius cried over his son, as the mansion drowned in sorrow, as everyone accepted defeat, a poor servant's son quietly made a decision that would change the entire story, change two families forever, and do something no one else believed could ever be done. Samuel stood quietly in the dim hallway, holding the basket tightly against his chest, listening to the soft cries coming from Ethan's room. He was only a servant's son, used to being invisible in the giant mansion, used to walking silently, used to lowering his head when adults passed by, but today something felt different. Something inside him kept pulling him toward the room where the millionaire's child lay fighting for his life. It wasn't curiosity, it wasn't boldness, it was something deeper, something warm and heavy in his small heart. Empathy. He remembered the way Ethan used to smile at him sometimes, even though Samuel was poor and wore old clothes. Ethan never looked down on him. He remembered a day when they were both younger. Ethan had offered him a cookie in the garden and said, "Friends share." That simple moment stayed in Samuel's heart for years, and now the thought of Ethan dying felt unbearable. Samuel pressed his lips together, remembering something else. Something he rarely talked about, something that only his mother knew. A time when he was the one lying weak and pale, when doctors had given up on him too. He could almost feel the memory like it was happening again, his body weak, his mother crying beside him, doctors shaking their heads, saying he wouldn't survive another night. But then his grandmother, who lived in a small village far away, came with a small cloth pouch filled with herbs. She spent hours preparing a strange-smelling mixture, feeding it to him in tiny sips while whispering old prayers, and somehow, miraculously, he had recovered. It wasn't magic, it wasn't luck, it was the ancient knowledge his grandmother carried, knowledge passed down through generations, knowledge the villagers trusted more than hospitals. Samuel blinked as the memory faded, then looked again at Ethan's door. He didn't know if the same herb would help Ethan. He didn't even know if it still grew in the forest outside the city. He didn't know if his grandmother's remedy would work for someone else. But one thing he did know. Ethan had only one day left, according to the doctors, and if Samuel did nothing, Ethan would die. The thought hurt him deeply, making his small hands tremble. He swallowed hard, trying to calm himself, but his heart whispered one clear sentence: "You have to try." He took a small step closer to the room, hearing Ethan's faint breathing, hearing Mr. Darius whispering broken words to his unconscious son, hearing the quiet sobs of people who believed all hope was gone. Samuel's chest tightened painfully. He wanted to knock on the door, he wanted to speak, but fear held him back. He was just a poor boy. Would anyone even listen to him? Would they believe a child who lived in the servants' quarters? Would they laugh at him, yell at him, tell him to leave? He bit his lip, shaking his head. His grandmother had always told him, "Courage is not the absence of fear, it is doing the right thing while your legs shake." So Samuel took a deep breath, wiped his sweaty palms on his shirt, and walked toward the kitchen where his mother was washing dishes. She looked up in surprise. "Samuel, why are you here? Aren't you supposed to help in the laundry?" she asked, but he didn't answer that. Instead he whispered, "Mama? Ethan is dying." Her expression softened with sadness. She nodded slowly. "Yes. The poor child, nothing can save him now." Samuel stepped closer, his voice trembling. "Maybe something can." His mother frowned, confused. He continued, "Grandma's herb, the one that saved me, maybe it can help him too." His mother froze, her eyes widening. "Samuel, no. That herb is rare, dangerous to find, and we don't even know if it works on someone else," she whispered fearfully. Samuel clenched his fists. "But if we don't try, he will die for sure." His mother looked torn, her hands trembling as she dried them. "Your grandmother always said that remedy was powerful. But the forest is too far, and you are just a child." Samuel shook his head, courage rising inside him. "I survived because someone took a risk for me. Now I want to take a risk for Ethan." His mother looked at him for a long, emotional moment, seeing not just her son, but someone brave, someone kind, someone willing to do the impossible for another child. Slowly she nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "Then we must tell Mr. Darius, he should decide." But Samuel shook his head quickly. "No. If we tell him now, he won't believe us. He'll stop us. He'll think we're foolish." His mother hesitated, torn between fear and belief. "Then what do you want to do?" she whispered. Samuel looked toward the dark window that opened toward the forest. "I want to go find the herb, tonight." His mother's heart dropped in fear. "Samuel, that forest is dangerous. You could get hurt." But he stepped forward and held her hands. "Mama?" Ethan will die tomorrow, he was kind to me, he doesn't deserve this. And if there is even one small chance that I can save him, I have to try." His mother covered her mouth, tears falling silently. She didn't want him to go, but she also knew she couldn't stop him, not when he was following the same brave heart his grandmother had. And so, as the mansion drowned in hopeless silence upstairs, down in the servants' quarters, a poor boy made a decision that no one expected, a decision that came from courage, kindness, and the memory of a miracle that once saved his own life. What he didn't know was that this night would lead him into darkness, danger, and a race against time, one that would change the millionaire's future forever, and make Samuel the boy who dared to do the impossible. The night grew darker as Samuel stepped away from the kitchen, his small heart beating loudly inside his chest. He felt scared, but the fear could not stop him, because every time he thought about Ethan lying pale and helpless upstairs, something warm and painful pushed him forward. He walked through the silent servant hallway, feeling shadows stretch around him, every step making him think, "Will I be too late?" His hands shook a little, but he kept moving, holding on to the memory of his grandmother's voice saying, "Some gifts are given to us so we can help others." Meanwhile, upstairs in the mansion, Mr. Darius sat beside Ethan's bed with a blank face, his eyes red, his body exhausted. He had not eaten all day, he had not slept, he had only cried and prayed. He kept hoping for a miracle, but the doctor's words repeated in his mind like a curse. "Only one day left," he whispered, gripping Ethan's cold fingers. The silence in the room felt heavy, like the walls were holding their breaths. Even the machines connected to Ethan beeped softly, as if afraid to disturb the fragile life still clinging to him. Mr. Darius whispered, "Don't leave me. I can't lose you." Back downstairs, Samuel finally reached the small worker's room where his father was fixing tools. His father looked up, surprised to see him awake so late. "Samuel, what are you doing here at this hour?" he asked, but Samuel walked straight to him, his voice shaking. "Papa? I need to go to the forest." His father's eyes widened instantly. "What? No, you're not leaving this house tonight, it's dangerous," he said firmly, but Samuel stood still. "Papa, listen to me. Ethan will die tomorrow, the doctor said so." His father's face softened with sadness. "I know, son, but what can we do?" Samuel swallowed his fear. "Grandma's herb, the one that saved me, it might save him too." His father blinked, shocked, unsure, afraid. He whispered, "Samuel, that herb only grows deep in the forest, past the river. It takes hours to reach." Samuel nodded. "Then we have to go now." But his father ran a hand through his hair, shaking his head in panic. "No, son, you're risking your life, and there's no guarantee the herb will work." Samuel lifted his chin, courage shining in his small eyes. "Papa, I don't care if it's dangerous. I don't care if the forest is scary. Ethan would do the same for me. I know he would." His father stared at him, seeing not a child, but a brave little soul carrying the heart of a hero. After a long moment he finally exhaled and nodded slowly. "All right. I won't let you go alone. I'm coming with you." Samuel felt relief wash over him. His father stood up quickly, grabbed a lantern, a rope, and a small knife for protection. "We'll need these. The forest is unpredictable," he said. Samuel grabbed his worn-out jacket, his small hands trembling but determined. They quietly slipped out through the back door of the mansion as the cold night wind touched their faces. The forest stood tall and dark in the distance, like a giant wall of moving shadows. Samuel felt chills run down his spine, but he kept walking beside his father. The path was covered in old leaves and twigs that cracked under their feet. Owls hooted from branches above, and strange animal sounds echoed through the darkness. Samuel clutched his father's hand tightly, whispering, "We're going to make it, we have to." They reached the edge of the forest and Samuel whispered, "Grandma used to say, the herb glows faintly at night. We just need to find it." The deeper they went, the darker it became. The lantern only lit a small circle around them. Everything else disappeared into shadows. Samuel stepped carefully, listening to his father's warnings. "Stay close, don't run, the forest tests your fear." After almost an hour of walking, Samuel suddenly gasped, "Papa, look." Beneath a bush, beside a fallen log, something faint shimmered, a soft blue glow. His father hurried to check, and his eyes widened. "This is it, the same herb your grandmother used." Samuel knelt quickly, gently touching the leaves. He felt hope flood his heart. "We found it, we really found it." They gathered as many leaves as they safely could, placing them inside a small cloth pouch. Samuel smiled for the first time that day, feeling like maybe, just maybe, he could save Ethan. But as they turned to leave, thunder rumbled somewhere in the distance. Clouds began covering the moon, and the wind grew stronger. His father whispered, "We must hurry, a storm is coming." Samuel clutched the pouch tightly, holding it like treasure, like life, like hope itself. They began running back through the forest, the lantern swinging wildly, the sky darkening, the air filling with sharp, cold gusts. But Samuel didn't stop, he didn't slow down, he didn't let go of the pouch even once, because somewhere far away in a quiet room filled with sorrow, a small boy was fighting for his last breath, and Samuel had decided that Ethan would not face that last breath alone. As he ran beside his father, the forest roaring around them, Samuel whispered one promise to himself: "I will save him, no matter what happens." And with that promise burning in his heart, he ran faster, clutching the impossible miracle he had found in the dark, ready to return and challenge fate itself. The storm grew louder as Samuel and his father ran through the dark forest, the wind pushing against them like invisible hands. The trees swayed wildly, branches crackling and breaking above their heads. Samuel held the cloth pouch tightly against his chest, protecting the glowing herb with everything he had. His small legs shook, but he didn't stop, he didn't slow down, not even for a second, because in his mind he could see Ethan's pale face, his weak breathing, and that image pushed him forward like fire in his heart. His father kept glancing at him, fear and pride mixing in his eyes. "Stay close, Samuel. Don't fall behind," he called, his voice barely reaching through the wind. Samuel nodded, breathing hard, his short breaths sounding like tiny cries. They tripped several times over roots and stones hidden beneath the leaves. But each time they got up again, refusing to waste even a moment. The storm clouds blocked the moonlight, making the forest almost pitch black. The lantern flickered dangerously. Almost going out, Samuel whispered, "Please don't die, not now," holding the lantern with one hand while holding the pouch with the other. After what felt like forever, they finally reached the river that separated the forest from the mansion grounds. But now the calm river they crossed earlier had turned into a rushing stream of muddy water. Samuel's father frowned deeply. "This is bad. The rain made the river dangerous." Samuel's heart began pounding harder. "But Ethan, he doesn't have time," he whispered, his voice shaking with fear and urgency. His father looked into his eyes and saw the truth. There was no turning back, no waiting, no delaying. They had to cross no matter how risky it was. Samuel's father grabbed his shoulders and said firmly, "Hold my hand tightly and do not let go, not even for one breath." Samuel nodded quickly, gripping his father's hand as if his life depended on it. Together they stepped into the cold rushing water. The current pushed with angry force, almost knocking Samuel off his feet. He gasped, feeling icy water splashing against his chest. But he held on, squeezing his father's hand and clutching the pouch to his heart. The water roared around them, rising higher with each step, but Samuel kept whispering, "For Ethan, for Ethan, for Ethan," like a prayer pushing him forward. Halfway across, a strong wave hit them, ripping Samuel's hand from his father's grip. Samuel screamed as he slipped, falling sideways, his body pulled by the violent current. But his father reacted instantly, grabbing Samuel's jacket just in time, pulling him up with all his strength. Samuel coughed and shivered, but he never loosened his grip on the pouch, not even for a heartbeat. Finally, with all their strength and fear burning through them, they reached the other side, collapsing on the muddy ground, breathing heavily, the storm pouring over them. Samuel's father looked at him with tears in his eyes. "You're brave, my son, braver than anyone in that mansion," he whispered. Samuel didn't answer, he simply stood up again because bravery meant nothing if he didn't reach Ethan in time. His father lifted the lantern, and together they ran toward the back gate, their feet splashing through puddles, their clothes soaked, their breaths quick and sharp. The mansion lights came into view at last, shining through the storm like guiding stars. Samuel felt hope rising again, even though fear still twisted inside him. When they reached the servant entrance, Samuel's mother rushed out, her face full of panic. "You're alive? Thank God you're alive," she cried, holding Samuel's face in her shaking hands, but he held out the pouch immediately. "Mama, we found it, we found the herb," she gasped, covering her mouth with trembling fingers, tears falling instantly. Samuel's father added, "We need to prepare the mixture fast, before the boy's time runs out." Samuel nodded quickly, his heart pounding with urgency. "We have to go upstairs, now." His mother hesitated, fear in her eyes. "Samuel, the millionaire, he won't believe you, he might stop you." But Samuel shook his head firmly. "Then we won't ask, we'll show him," he whispered, his small voice filled with a strength far beyond his age. Samuel's father lifted the lantern high, and the three of them ran through the empty servant corridors, heading toward the grand staircase that led to Ethan's room. The mansion felt different now, quieter, darker, heavier, as if it sensed the ticking clock that hung over Ethan's fragile life. Samuel's heart pounded faster with each step. He could almost feel the boy's weak breathing, almost feel time slipping away. His hands shook as he held the pouch tighter. He whispered to himself, "Please, let it work, please." When they reached the top of the stairs, they heard faint voices coming from Ethan's room. Doctor voices, sad voices, final voices. Samuel closed his eyes for one moment, remembering Ethan sharing a cookie with him years ago, and whispered, "I'm coming. I won't let you die." And with that final promise burning inside him like fire, Samuel pushed open the door, stepping into the room with the glowing herb that might save a life, shock everyone, and change the future forever. Samuel pushed the door open slowly, his heart thumping so loudly he could hear it inside his ears. The doctors looked up in surprise. Mr. Darius turned sharply, his tired eyes filled with confusion as he saw the soaked, muddy servant child entering his son's room. Everyone froze. Samuel stood there breathless, dripping rainwater onto the polished floor, clutching the tiny cloth pouch like it held the whole world inside. His chest rose and fell quickly, but his eyes were steady, filled with a determination no one expected from a poor boy. Mr. Darius took a step forward, his voice tight with shock. "Samuel, what are you doing here?" he asked. Samuel swallowed hard, his voice small but strong. "Sir? I came to help Ethan." The doctors exchanged looks, some confused, some annoyed. One of them shook his head and muttered, "This is not the time for interruptions." But Samuel didn't step back. Instead he held the pouch higher and whispered, "I have something that can save him." The room fell silent, completely silent. The doctors stared at him as if he had spoken nonsense. One doctor sighed, "Child, don't say such things. This is a critical condition. Medicine has failed." Samuel took a shaky step forward. "I know, but this is not hospital medicine. This is something older, something real," he whispered. His mother entered the room behind him, her hands shaking, her eyes full of fear. She bowed deeply to Mr. Darius. "Sir, please forgive us, but Samuel believes this herb can help. It saved his life once." Mr. Darius's eyes widened slightly, remembering how weak Samuel used to be when he first arrived years ago. He had been small, pale, and fragile, yet now he stood strong in front of him. The memory flickered in the millionaire's mind, but he still struggled to believe. How can a herb do what doctors cannot?" he whispered. Samuel opened the pouch slowly, revealing faintly glowing leaves. The light was soft, almost magical. The doctors stepped closer in surprise. One of them whispered, What kind of plant glows like that?" But none of them knew the answer. Samuel's father finally spoke, his voice respectful but firm. "Sir, we know this sounds foolish, but this herb saved Samuel when doctor said he only had a few hours left." The room shifted. The doctors frowned, exchanging uncertain glances. Mr. Darius stared at the glowing herb, something inside him whispering a feeling he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, small, fragile, but real. He looked at Ethan, then at Samuel, then at the pouch, his voice trembling. "How do you use it?" Samuel stepped forward, his hands trembling with purpose. "My grandmother taught my mother, and she taught my father, and they taught me," he whispered. "We have to crush the leaves, mix them with warm water, and give it to him in small drops." The doctors hesitated. One stepped forward, shaking his head. "This is untested, unknown. It might be dangerous." Samuel looked at him with steady eyes. "He will die anyway, if we do nothing." The room fell silent again because no one could argue with that. Finally, Mr. Darius closed his eyes, breathing shakily. When he opened them, tears filled the corners. He whispered, "Do it, please, do it." Samuel nodded quickly. His father hurried to help. His mother rushed to get warm water, and together they prepared the mixture. The glowing herb crushed gently between their fingers, releasing a scent that filled the whole room with something strangely calm, something that felt like hope floating in the air. The doctors watched closely, still unsure, still doubtful, but also unable to deny the miracle they were witnessing. Samuel scooped a small amount of the mixture into a spoon, his hands shaking but his heart steady. He approached Ethan's bed. Mr. Darius stood behind him, one hand trembling on his son's forehead. Samuel whispered softly, "Ethan, please wake up, please fight. I'm here." His voice cracked, full of emotion far too deep for a poor child his age. He lifted the spoon to Ethan's lips, carefully letting a tiny drop fall into his mouth. Everyone held their breath. The room felt frozen. Even the storm outside seemed to pause. Samuel waited a few seconds, then gave another drop, then another. Ethan remained still, silent, pale. Samuel's heart ached, but he didn't stop. Drop by drop, he fed him the mixture like it was the last hope left in the world. Minutes passed, heavy, slow, painful minutes. Samuel whispered the village prayer his grandmother used to say, his voice soft, trembling. "Let life return, let hope return." His mother stood behind him, crying silently. His father placed a hand on his shoulder, giving him strength. Mr. Darius covered his face, unable to watch, unable to look away, unable to breathe properly as fear and hope battled inside him. Then suddenly a small sound broke the silence, a tiny breath, a slight cough, so soft it seemed like imagination. But it wasn't imagination. Ethan's fingers twitched gently, Ethan's lips moved slightly. Samuel leaned forward, eyes widening. "Ethan," he whispered. Ethan's eyelids fluttered, opening just a little, revealing tired but living eyes. Mr. Darius fell to his knees, sobbing uncontrollably. The doctors gasped, stepping back in disbelief. Samuel felt his heart explode with relief and happiness. He whispered again, voice shaking, "Ethan, you're waking up, you're coming back." And in that moment, in that fragile miracle, everyone in the room realized one truth. The poor servant's son had done what even the richest man in the country could not do. He had done the impossible, and now nothing in this mansion would ever be the same again. For a few seconds the room stayed frozen, as if no one dared to breathe. Ethan's weak cough echoed softly, mixing with the sound of the storm outside. The doctors stared with wide eyes, unable to explain what they had just witnessed. Mr. Darius knelt beside his son's bed, tears pouring down his face, his hands shaking as he touched Ethan's cheek. "Ethan, my boy, can you hear me?" he whispered through trembling lips. Ethan blinked slowly, his eyes heavy but alive. A tiny sound escaped his throat. Not a word, not a cry, just a fragile breath. Yet that single breath felt stronger than any miracle Mr. Darius had ever prayed for. Samuel stood still, his hands pressed together as if afraid to move, afraid to break the moment. The pouch of herbs still clutched in his fingers, glowing faintly in the warm light of the room. His heart pounded against his chest so hard he felt dizzy. He whispered softly, "Please keep breathing, please." Ethan's eyelids fluttered again, his lips parting slightly as he tried to speak. The doctors leaned in, shocked beyond words. One of them whispered, "This shouldn't be medically possible." Another doctor shook his head slowly, whispering to himself, "I've never seen anything like this." But Samuel wasn't listening to them. All he could see was Ethan fighting to stay alive, fighting in a way he hadn't seen since the boy got sick. Slowly Ethan's breathing steadied, still weak, still fragile, but more stable than it had been in days. Mr. Darius covered his mouth, sobbing quietly, the weight of fear lifting slowly from his heart. Thank you, God," he whispered, but then he lifted his eyes toward Samuel, his voice breaking with emotion. "And thank you, Samuel." Samuel looked down, overwhelmed, unable to believe that someone like Mr. Darius would thank someone like him. He stepped back nervously, unsure what to do next, but Mr. Darius reached out and held his shoulders gently. "You saved my son. You saved my whole world," he whispered with a sincerity that made everyone in the room fall silent. Samuel's mother cried quietly in the doorway, covering her mouth with trembling hands, her heart swelling with pride and relief. Samuel's father wiped his eyes roughly, turning away so no one would see his tears. But even he couldn't hide the emotion shaking inside him. The doctor stepped forward, examining Ethan again, their hands trembling slightly as they checked his pulse, his temperature, his breathing. One of them whispered, "His body is responding, his fever is dropping, his heartbeat is stronger." Another doctor shook his head again, whispering, "This shouldn't be happening, but it is." Samuel stepped closer hesitantly, his small voice trembling. "Should I give him more?" One doctor hesitated, unsure whether to trust a poor child, but Mr. Darius nodded firmly. "Whatever you did, it worked. Do it again." Samuel nodded and took Ethan's hand gently, whispering softly, "You're strong, Ethan. Just a little more, stay with us." Then he fed him another small spoon of the mixture, careful and gentle, the glowing herb shimmering faintly as the drops touched Ethan's lips. The doctors watched closely, leaning in as if they were witnessing a sacred ritual. Minutes passed slowly, but each second Ethan seemed to grow a little stronger, his breathing deeper, his eyelids less heavy, the color in his cheeks returning slowly. Samuel felt relief fill him like warm light. He whispered, "That's it, keep fighting." Mr. Darius wiped his eyes again, unable to stop crying, his heart overflowing with gratitude he couldn't put into words. He looked at Samuel again, his voice shaking. "You, a child, risked your life in the storm, for my son." Samuel looked down shyly and whispered, "He was kind to me. He didn't treat me like I was poor." Those words struck Mr. Darius deeply. He felt guilt wash through him. Guilt for every moment he never noticed Samuel. Guilt for every time he walked past him without seeing the brave heart inside him. Guilt for how he assumed wealth meant power, when in truth the greatest power had come from the poorest boy in his home. He knelt next to Samuel, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "From today, you are not invisible, and you will never be ignored again." Samuel's eyes widened, his lips parting. Slightly in shock, he didn't know how to respond. He wasn't used to anyone speaking to him like that, especially not a millionaire. Just then Ethan opened his eyes wider, struggling to speak, his voice barely a whisper. "Dad." The word was weak, thin, fragile, but it was a word, a real word, the first one in days. Mr. Darius broke into tears again, falling forward and hugging his son gently, whispering, "I'm here. I'm here, Ethan. You're going to be all right. The doctor stepped back, allowing the moment to unfold, their expressions full of disbelief and emotion. And in that room, filled with tears, relief, and the echoes of a miracle, it became clear to everyone that something extraordinary had happened. Something no money in the world could buy, something only the heart of a brave, poor servant's boy could bring. Ethan had survived the impossible, and the destiny of both families had changed forever. Though Samuel did not yet know how deeply this night would reshape his future, his value, and his place in a world that once overlooked him entirely. The news of Ethan's sudden improvement spread through the mansion like a quiet shockwave. Servants whispered in hallways, doctors murmured in disbelief, and Mr. Darius sat beside his son, still crying, still unable to believe he was witnessing life returning to the child he thought he would lose forever. Ethan slept peacefully now, his breathing steadier, his cheeks slowly gaining color. But the room that had been filled with hopelessness only hours ago now felt like it was holding a warm and fragile miracle. Samuel stood quietly near the door, watching everything unfold with wide eyes. He felt like he was standing in a dream too big for someone like him, a poor boy who used to wipe floors and carry towels, yet tonight he had carried something no one else had, hope. His mother moved beside him, wiping her tears again and again, whispering, "You did it, Samuel, you really did it." His father stood with pride shining in his eyes, the kind of pride he had never shown so openly before. But Samuel wasn't thinking about pride. He wasn't thinking about the risky forest journey or the storm or the powerful herb that glowed like moonlight. He was thinking only of Ethan, the small boy who once gave him a cookie and called him a friend. He whispered softly, "Please get fully better, please," his voice trembling with emotion as he watched Ethan sleep peacefully. Meanwhile, Mr. Darius finally stood, wiping his face with shaking hands. He walked toward Samuel slowly, each step heavy with emotion. When he reached him, he knelt so they were eye to eye, a gesture Samuel never imagined from a man so powerful. "Samuel," he whispered, his voice breaking softly, "you saved my son. I will never forget what you did." Samuel lowered his head shyly. He didn't know what to say, his small hands squeezed together nervously, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't want him to die." Mr. Darius placed his hands on Samuel's shoulders gently. "You did something no doctor, no medicine, and no amount of money could do." Samuel's heart thudded in his chest. "You risked your life, you crossed the storm, you went into the forest, all for a boy who wasn't even your family." Samuel blinked, tears forming in his eyes. "He was kind to me. Kindness should always come back," he whispered softly. But outside the room, not everyone was ready to accept what had happened. A few servants gathered near the staircase, whispering sharply, some filled with disbelief, some with jealousy, some with suspicion. One servant muttered, "How can a poor boy do more than doctors?" Another whispered, "Maybe it was luck. Maybe the boy didn't really save him." Jealousy is a dangerous fire, and tonight it flickered quietly in the dark corners of the mansion. But none of them dared speak too loudly because they saw how Mr. Darius stood beside Samuel like a shield, like a man ready to protect the truth with everything he had. Inside the room, the doctors began preparing new tests, trying to understand the impossible recovery. One doctor approached Mr. Darius hesitantly. "Sir, we may need samples of the herb for research," he said carefully, but Mr. Darius shook his head. "Not without Samuel's permission. He found it, he risked everything. This herb saved my son because of him." The doctor nodded with respect, suddenly seeing the small boy not as a servant's child, but as someone extraordinary, someone who had changed everything with courage older than his age. Samuel felt overwhelmed by all the eyes on him. He stepped back slowly, whispering to his mother, "Can I leave the room, just for a moment?" His mother nodded gently, and he slipped out quietly, walking down the dim hallway to the small window overlooking the storm-soaked forest. He pressed his hand against the cold glass and finally let out a long, trembling breath. The night air outside was still wild, but inside his chest there was a strange calm, a strange peace, as if something heavy had been lifted from his heart. But while Samuel found a moment of quiet, Mr. Darius made a decision, one that would change Samuel's life forever. He turned toward Samuel's parents, his voice firm yet emotional. "From this moment forward, Samuel will never live like a poor boy again." Their eyes widened in shock. He continued, "I will pay for his education, the best schools, everything he needs." Samuel's father nearly dropped the lantern he was holding. "Sir, this is too much, we can't accept." But Mr. Darius raised a hand. Gently, "You can, because your son gave me back my life, my family, and I will give him a future worthy of his courage." And in that moment, Samuel returned to the doorway, hearing the last words, his eyes widening, his breath catching in his chest. He whispered, "Sir, you don't have to do that." Mr. Darius turned to him, tears in his eyes again. "I know I don't have to, "But I want to." Samuel felt warmth spread through his chest, a feeling he had never felt so strongly before. Being valued, being seen, being appreciated, and as Ethan slept peacefully in the bed behind them, breathing stronger with each passing moment, everyone in the room knew that this night had not only saved a child, it had reshaped destinies, rewritten stories, and lit a flame of hope that would never fade. But none of them knew that the biggest change of all was still waiting, a change that would reveal truths, challenge hearts, and bind their lives together in a way no one could have predicted. The impossible had happened tonight, but the story was far from over. The morning light slowly entered the mansion, soft and golden, replacing the stormy darkness that had covered everything the night before. Ethan slept peacefully now, his breathing steady, his little chest rising and falling with calm rhythm. The doctors took quiet notes, still unable to understand the miracle they had witnessed, but they no longer questioned it, because sometimes life gives answers that science cannot, and sometimes those answers come from the most unexpected places. Samuel stood near the doorway, his clothes still a little damp from the night before, his eyes tired but filled with a warm glow. He watched Ethan sleep, feeling something deep inside his heart, a mix of relief, joy, and disbelief that he had actually saved a life. His mother and father stood behind him, proud in a way they could not describe. They knew their son had done something rare, something brave, something extraordinary, but for Samuel, it didn't feel like greatness, it felt like doing what was right. Mr. Darius walked toward him slowly, looking very different from the broken man of the night before, no longer drowning in helplessness, but standing with a soft strength in his shoulders. He placed a gentle hand on Samuel's head, something he had never done before. "You brought back my son," he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. "I can never repay you for that." Samuel lowered his eyes, humility softening his face. "I only wanted him to live," he replied quietly. Mr. Darius turned toward the doctors. "Make sure whatever Samuel needs, whatever his family needs, it's done," he ordered firmly. The doctors nodded, seeing clearly that this poor servant boy was no longer someone to ignore. Samuel's mother wiped more tears from her cheeks, shaking with gratitude. Samuel's father placed a hand over his heart, whispering, "Thank you, sir, thank you." But the greatest moment came when Ethan's eyes opened again, slowly, like a sunrise after a long night. He blinked, looked around, then whispered softly, "Dad." Mr. Darius rushed to his side, holding his small hand, tears falling again, but this time tears of pure joy. "I'm here, Ethan. I'm here," he said. Ethan looked weak but alive, his lips trembling into a small smile. Then he moved his eyes toward the doorway, toward Samuel. Samuel froze as Ethan whispered, "You came back." The words were soft but clear, filled with a childlike innocence and gratitude. Samuel stepped closer, his eyes welling up. "I told you I wouldn't let you go," he whispered, trying hard not to cry. Ethan reached his small hand toward him. Samuel held it gently, the two boys sharing a moment that felt sacred, a moment only heart could understand. For the rest of the day Ethan slowly gained strength, drinking water, sitting up with help, even smiling weakly. The doctors confirmed the impossible. His condition was improving rapidly, faster than any medical prediction, faster than logic allowed. "It's like his body woke up again," one doctor whispered, shaking his head, as if something pulled him back from the edge. Outside the room, the servants who once whispered in doubt now watched Samuel with new eyes, no longer seeing a poor boy, no longer seeing someone small or unimportant. They saw the boy who saved the master's son, the boy who risked his life, the boy who carried courage that money could never buy. Some bowed their heads slightly as he passed, others whispered blessings softly, and a few even apologized in their hearts for doubting him. Later, when the sun was high and the mansion was alive again, Mr. Darius called Samuel and his parents into the study. The room was quiet, warm, and filled with sunlight. Samuel stood nervously, his small hands clasped together. Mr. Darius looked at him with deep respect. "Samuel," he began, "your bravery has changed everything, not only for Ethan but for all of us." Samuel blinked, unsure where this was going. Mr. Darius continued, "From today on, you will not live as a servant's child." Samuel's mother gasped softly. Samuel looked up with wide eyes, confused. "Sir, what do you mean?" he whispered. Mr. Darius smiled gently. "You will study in the best school, you will have tutors, books, uniforms, you will have everything Ethan has." Samuel's breath caught in his chest. He stepped back slightly, unable to believe the words. His father shook his head, overwhelmed. "Sir, we cannot accept such a big gift." But Mr. Darius raised his hand, stopping him. "This is not a gift. This is what Samuel earned with his courage," he replied softly. Samuel felt something warm fill his heart, something he had never felt before. Recognition, respect, dignity. Then Mr. Darius knelt down, placing both hands on Samuel's shoulders. "You're part of this family now. Ethan's friend, our hero, he whispered, tears shining in his eyes. Samuel's lips trembled as he whispered back, "Thank you, sir. I'll do my best, always." And as the evening light returned, filling the mansion with a golden glow, two families, one rich, one poor, found themselves tied together forever, bound not by money or status, but by bravery, compassion, and a miracle born from a little boy's heart. Samuel didn't just save Ethan's life, he changed the course of his own life, proving that sometimes the greatest miracles come from the smallest hands, and that courage doesn't need wealth, it only needs a pure heart.